I'm over it. Bring on the spring, I say.
Had enough. Too much, too heavy. I want summer.
Winter strikes again, schools shut, traffic slowed, but settle in. It's not over yet. There's still plenty more to come. First there was snow, then there was ice, and through it all, winds of up to 80 k's an hour. Toronto is getting pummeled by another major winter storm. Farah Morelli joins us live from Bathurst and Davenport. And Farah, that could be a dangerous hill behind you there. And I'm guessing that you have an umbrella now because it has now turned to rain out there.
It sure has turned to rain, and this hill has become quite treacherous. We just actually watched a streetcar inch its way up, get stuck in the intersection before finally making its way up. But I want you to take a look over my shoulder and notice something about this intersection. It's actually relatively quiet. It's 6 o'clock, a time when this would be rush hour here, and there's not a whole lot of cars. The reason for that is people are probably listening to the city's advice to stay off the roads if they can today. It's been a wild day of snow than ice, but all in all, the city says they actually saw less accumulation than they expected, and commutes today have been not as painful as many people expected.
These 7 letters were the only colorful sight in Toronto today. Early this morning, thick white flakes blowing sideways blanketed the city, making simple tasks like just walking a challenge.
Yeah, it's a bit cold and windy. The snow hurts a bit when you're walking through it.
It's brutal. It's cold, it's icy, it's windy.
The weather's really bad.
Still, some were more adventurous than others.
I could have walked in the path, but I figured I'm dressed for it. It's some fresh air, so why not?
The 1-2 punch of snow then ice prompted the Toronto District School Board to close schools for the first time in 8 years. Many others chose to stay home too. Some main roads were relatively quiet, and maneuvering the slippery conditions was just half the battle.
How has it been for visibility so far on the roads?
It's horrible. It's windy, you cannot see. We are putting into windshield washer, we need it because of snow.
At 7:45 this morning, the city says salting began. Then, after snow began accumulating, the plows hit the streets.
Let's talk some of the numbers. How many plows and salting trucks are out there today?
So it's our full complement. We have 1,100 pieces of equipment, so there are 200 salters, 600 road plows, and 300 sidewalk plows.
The TTC says the morning commute went as normal as it could. It has 60 buses on standby to replace any streetcars that might have issues this evening. Some basic winter tools, like salt, suddenly became a hot commodity today. Many Canadian Tire locations, including this one at Lakeshore and Leslie, were completely sold out of salt.
Just have to wait until they get it back in stock.
So what do we got in here?
Yeah, here's the salt. What left?
Back downtown at St. Lawrence Pro Hardware, bags upon bags of salt. But they're going fast. So are these.
Do you think some people leave it to the last minute?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, it's coming back. Now, Dwight, some people might be coming home to snow-covered side streets, and don't be surprised because the city says that it's not going to be able to get to plowing those side streets until after this storm passes, which it doesn't expect will happen until about 11 or 12 tonight. And that process will take about 18 hours. So we're looking well into Wednesday for when those side streets will be plowed. And as you heard earlier in this story, the TDSB has did decide to close schools today. Coming up a little bit later on the show, I'll have more on that decision and what people can expect for tomorrow.
Thank you, Farah. And conditions were no better today at Pearson Airport. De-icing, trying to keep flights on schedule. But as of just a few minutes ago, 273 flights out had been canceled, about 40% of all departures, while 265 flights in had been canceled. That's approximately about 38% of arrivals. Watches and warnings, it has been a busy day for our Colette.
It has. You know what, though, Dwight? We're getting there. We're getting towards the end of this storm system, as it's got a few more hours to go, but we're going to be winding down as we're heading towards midnight. Now, we're still in the winter storm warning, all the areas you see in red, and that does include the city. Also, a little area, a smaller area in the freezing rain warning back to the west. And then the areas you see here in orange, that's our wind warning. In fact, in some of those areas like Niagara, we may see some of these winds gusting to 90 or even 100 kilometers an hour. So very significant. And also in the areas where we have snow, we have strong winds, so blowing the snow around and reducing visibility. I really like this imagery here because it shows you the different types of precipitation that we're getting with this system. Obviously into the whites, we're into the snowfall, the purple, that's some of the ice pellets. And then we get into more freezing rain. And of course, closer to the lakeshore, we're seeing more of that rainfall. And that mix in a very small area, essentially, geographically, it's a pretty small area where we're seeing all these different types of precipitation. And you can see why when you look at some of the numbers with the temperatures. Markham at -5, the city at -1, and St. Catharines at the freezing mark at this moment. So now as it's moving through, there's going to be a little bit less. It becomes a bit patchier as it's going through. We're going to see the winds changing direction, though, and they will stay on the gusty side. These are some of the current gusts over 60 kilometers an hour here. They're going to shift around to the southeast and then the southwest and stay strong into tomorrow when they'll be westerly, and that will give us some squalls off of Lake Huron, and so areas close to the lakeshore, you'll be seeing some squalls there. However, as I walk you through the next few hours here, taking you towards 7 p.m., 9 p.m., we're going to see the temperature at the lakeshore coming up just a little bit more, so we get more into rain showers, less freezing rain and ice pellets. It stays, though, as some snowfall to the north and certainly to the east. Over towards the Ottawa Valley, 30 to 40 centimeters possible with this storm before it's over with. But look at this. I'm taking you closer to midnight. We're getting past midnight and see how it's really breaking up and winding down. And that's when we get into a situation of more scattered flurries, which we'll have as we head through the day on Wednesday. I'll have more on the forecast and what will be happening with our temperatures, too, coming up, Dwight.
Just a slushy mess out there. Thank you, Colette.
It sure is. You're welcome.
A major development on Parliament Hill. Jody Wilson-Raybould has resigned from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet after days of questions surrounding the PMO's alleged interference in the criminal case of construction giant SNC-Lavalin. Here's how it played out. It started earlier this year when Wilson-Raybould was shuffled out of her role as Attorney General and Minister of Justice back on January 14th. She was moved to Minister of Veterans Affairs. Then last week, the Globe and Mail dropped a bombshell report alleging the Prime Minister's office tried to pressure her to help SNC-Lavalin avoid criminal prosecution, a claim Trudeau has rejected. That was February 7th. Now, 5 days after that, Wilson-Raybould has left Trudeau's cabinet and hired legal counsel. Now, Wilson-Raybould says legally she cannot publicly comment on the allegations and hired that lawyer to advise her on what she can say. Julie Van Duzen following the twists and turns of all of this from Ottawa for us. And Julie, Wilson-Raybould did have something to say about her resignation today.
Well, she put it out in a letter, and like you say, another blockbuster kind of move in an already tumultuous story. So she put it out and said it was with a heavy heart that she steps down from Veterans Affairs. She said she thanked her constituents and she thanked her staff. She did not thank the Prime Minister, which was interesting. And she also talked about the fact that she'd employed a lawyer, and not just any lawyer, Dwight. It's Thomas Cromwell, who was a judge on the Supreme Court. So it'll be interesting to see how he advises her on what she can say and not say. Don't forget, yesterday the Prime Minister put his full support behind Wilson-Raybould when he was at an event in Vancouver, said he supports her, and the fact that she's in cabinet should say everything. Well, she's not in cabinet now. And the leader of the opposition, Andrew Scheer, says that the Prime Minister must keep all correspondence, emails, documentation, anything to do with correspondence between PMO officials, Wilson-Raybould. This is going to be possibly a big case, and he says this resignation shows a government in chaos. Take a listen.
It's clear that there is more to this story than what Justin Trudeau is asking Canadians to believe. For days now, he is asking us to take his word that nothing has happened, and now we clearly see by these actions that there's a different versions of events.
And the big question is, Julie, the fallout from this for this government in an election year.
Yes. Well, we don't know because the election is in October, but if you were to look at it now, think about it. It could have fallout in Quebec, where he's trying to win more seats. This is a big Quebec firm that employs thousands of people. It could poke holes in the arguments he's made recently in the Huawei case, that his government is all about rule of law and not political interference. It could disrupt the whole progress that has been made by the government on the Indigenous file. Today, the Union of BC Chiefs put out a release saying they want the Prime Minister to apologize to Wilson Raybould for the appalling behavior and the kind of smear campaign that was going on behind the scenes, they say, the whisper campaign, suggesting that she was hard to work with and a thorn in the government's side. So a lot to patch up there for sure. So keep an eye tomorrow, Dwight, on the Justice Committee meeting. It's an emergency meeting that was pushed for by the opposition. They will want to hear from PMO officials, possibly the Prime Minister, from Wilson Raybould. It'll all go to a vote, and we'll see how the Liberals vote on that.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to speak about Raybould's resignation from his cabinet this hour. You can see him right there. We'll take you there live as soon as he begins to speak. Police say they now know the name of the woman caught on video hurling a chair from the balcony of a downtown condo. Investigators say tips from the public helped them figure out the woman's identity. Now police are waiting for her to turn herself in. Chris Glover joins us live now with more on this. And Chris, weather may play a role in whether she makes it to a police station to turn herself in.
It may, in fact, have. Police say they have made contact with her or her representative. They're trying to arrange for her to turn herself in and explain her side of the story. After throwing chairs that threw the city into a tailspin.
Prison. She could kill somebody.
Police now say they know who the woman is who hurled 2 chairs off a high-rise condo near the Gardiner Expressway.
But we don't go into the strategies that we used to track her down. I will tell you this. We received a lot of tips.
A similar chair toss off a Toronto balcony was reported in December, but didn't pick up nearly the same public outcry. The online witch hunt for this culprit led a lot of people to one now deleted social media account. Can you guys confirm that?
I won't be confirming who the person is until she speaks to investigators.
Police won't say how long they'll give her.
We want to be flexible. There's nothing emergent in this.
Somebody threw something out of the stands.
In 2016, a man tossed a beer can during a Jays game. It happened on a Tuesday, and police gave the suspect until Thursday night to turn himself in. As for this incident, police are also investigating if she was an Airbnb guest. Was it Airbnb that contacted police or police that contacted Airbnb?
We contacted police.
After what?
Based on what you just conveyed, right? There's a lot of conversation. We want to be helpful. If there's a chance this may have happened through an Airbnb listing, but we don't have anything to confirm.
We showed the video to the condo board at 111 Bathurst, another downtown condo.
Oh. That's crazy.
The board says their building has experienced issues from short-term rentals. Last year, this fire destroyed a suite on the 8th floor at 111 Bathurst. It was sparked by a carelessly tossed lit cigarette, but police never found the culprit. The board doesn't know if it was a short-term renter, but they're suspicious.
There's really no control over these guests, and because they're hosted by people that we don't really have any kind of record or knowledge of.
Police tell us that they are aware of a second video, Dwight, which shows a different perspective of multiple people, in fact, on the balcony. And they say that they're using that video as part of the investigation. But when we asked if anyone else would be facing charges, all they would say is that at this point, they're only focused on that woman who threw the chairs.
All right, we'll continue to follow this one. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Developing news tonight from the East End. A man is dead after a shooting near Lawrence and Galloway. Nellie Nanowski is live at the scene for us right now. And Nellie, the shooting happened inside the building behind you this afternoon.
Right, Dwight. What you see behind me right now is some police cruisers and, of course, some police tape. And witnesses tell us that the shooting happened inside the hallway, actually. They heard gunshots at around 3 today. When they went outside, they saw that one of the walls in the hallway was riddled with bullets. When police got here, they told us that they found one man. He was suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, and he didn't have any vital signs, so they did perform CPR and try to revive him, but that failed, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, 2 of the women I spoke to here just outside of the building not too long ago, they told me that the victim is in his 20s. He's well known in this community, and he's actually an aspiring rapper. They say that he did not live in this building, but his brothers did, and he was here visiting them.
Apparently, the body's still in there. It's the body's in the hallway. So apparently, the guy, his name is Streets. That's what they're saying. He was an upcoming rapper. He has brothers who live here, and his vehicle should still be in the parking lot here. But apparently, people said they saw him this morning, just in the lobby. He lives here. He's a normal guy.
So witnesses say that they heard a loud bang when this all happened, that they ran outside. One of the women told us that the security inside barricaded themselves inside one of the rooms because both people who live here and people who work inside this building don't feel safe.
I'm fearful of going back into my apartment because this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They need to have security patrolling the floors. And they need more lights and stuff in the hallways. If they don't want to put camera, they need to put more lights.
Nellie, police saying anything about a possible suspect?
We do have one description, Dwight. Witnesses say that they saw a man fleeing. He was fleeing on foot. He was wearing a black toque. He had a black jacket on with a backpack. He also had black pants with a white stripe. So police right now are questioning witnesses. They're also trying to gather any security footage from the outside of this building or for any adjoining properties. And it looks like it's going to be a late one, Dwight, as they're going to be scouring this area and it's all covered in snow.
Thank you, Natalie. Peel police are investigating their first homicide of the year. Officers were called to a home in Mississauga early this morning. They found a 74-year-old woman there. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Police have taken a man into custody but have not laid charges yet. The homicide unit has taken over the case and they say there are no other suspects. Police would not say what relationship existed between the man and the woman. And officers have made another arrest in a 2-year-old murder. 21-year-old Dylan Greenway was shot outside a Scarborough school in March of 2017. On Friday, investigators arrested 20-year-old Hafiz Mohedin Hassan and 20-year-old Mohammed Patel. Both men have been charged with first-degree murder. Patel is also facing a firearm charge after police say they seized a loaded semi-automatic gun during the arrest. And Toronto police say a man was robbed after getting into this car thinking it was the rideshare he ordered. It happened on Friday night near Yonge and Shepherd. Once in the car, 3 suspects robbed the man. They took his Canada Goose jacket, an iPhone, and wallet with close to $800 in cash. Police are on the lookout for a black 4-door sedan. The 3 suspects, all male, they are wanted for robbery, kidnapping, and forcible confinement. Just how much control will the province have over the city's subways? That's not clear yet, but some ground rules have been laid to examine the possibilities. In a new agreement, a joint group will look at the possible outcomes. One is Premier Doug Ford's proposal that a full transfer of the subway go to Ontario. The second suggests the province take on all subway infrastructure, including maintenance of new and existing lines, but it would leave operations in the hands of the city. And the third would have the city maintain ownership, but Ontario would take on any expansion going forward. The Ford government said a takeover is meant to speed up new projects. Ford himself issued a statement today saying construction has been, quote, stuck in red tape for years. All right, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about to comment today on the resignation of Jody Wilson-Raybould from his cabinet. He's speaking now in Winnipeg. Let's listen in.
From cabinet. Frankly, I am both surprised and disappointed by her decision to step down. And let me tell you why. This resignation is not consistent with conversations I had with Jody a few weeks ago when I asked her to serve as Canada's Minister for Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence, nor is it consistent with the conversations we've had lately. In regards to the matter of SNC-Lavalin, let me be direct. The Government of Canada did its job, and to the clear public standards expected of it. If anyone felt differently, they had an obligation to raise that with me. No one, including Jody, did that. This morning, I convened a cabinet meeting to inform my colleagues of Jody's departure. Minister Sajjan has immediately taken over Jody's responsibilities as Acting Minister of Veterans Affairs. We are as committed as ever to ensuring that Canada's veterans receive the care and support of a grateful nation. I know that Minister Sajjan will serve our women and men in uniform and our veterans with dedication. Our government's commitment to reconciliation is larger than any one person, and we will continue to work closely with Indigenous partners as we walk this path together. And make no mistake, we will remain squarely focused on middle-class Canadians, creating jobs, growing the economy, and delivering more opportunities for hard-working families from coast to coast to coast. Hier soir, j'ai accepté la démission de Jody Wilson-Raybould.
I accepted Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation from cabinet. Honestly, her resignation surprised and disappointed me. Let me tell you why. This resignation is not consistent with the conversations we had with Jody a few weeks ago when I asked her to serve as a Veteran Affairs Minister and as Associate Defense Minister.
That is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau commenting on today's resignation of Jody Wilson-Raybould from his cabinet. It comes after days of questions following allegations the PMO tried to pressure her to help SNC-Lavalin avoid criminal prosecution. Trudeau just now saying he was surprised and disappointed by her resignation, adding no one, including Wilson-Raybould, raised any concerns about how his government was handling the SNC-Lavalin matter. Back to our streets now. We are continuing to track today's big snowstorm. You're looking live, it's not live, it's time-lapse video of the drive from Ottawa into Toronto heading into the storm. Right into it. You're watching CBC Toronto News at 6. We'll be right back.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Police say when you see snow, go slow or else this happens. Not sure this driver heeded that advice. The car ending up on the concrete dividing barrier. This happened on the 401 near Pearson. OPP responding to dozens of accidents on GTA highways during the commute home tonight. To most people, it may look like any other tree in the front yard of a home, but to some, it tells the story of a young man who did not return home from war. As Lisa Shing reports, a city councilor says something special needs to be done to preserve the story this tree holds.
If you get the chance, for Christ's sakes, don't get on this side of the water.
A letter from Sylvia Irwin's uncle, Keith Hodgkinson, sent back to Canada during the Second World War, days before his plane crashed overseas. That was 76 years ago. Irwin was 6.
I can remember my mother crying, and here I go, I'm going to get emotional. You know? So I've done a lot to look up and keep that memory alive.
Irwin's research uncovered old letters, photos, and mementos. What she didn't know, there's a legend rooted in her family's old West End neighborhood. The story is her grandmother planted this elm tree in memory of her son, Irwin's uncle.
And do you remember this tree being here? Oh yeah, because it used to go right over the veranda. Yeah, before it was that big. You know? Yeah, the branches used to go right over the porch. Yeah, it was lovely. She definitely planted the tree, but why she planted it, I don't know. Grandmother, I'm glad.
Not until CBC called after hearing the story from an old neighbor, Bob Carswell.
It's gentle buds to wake anew, a memory of a son parents once knew.
Carswell recently found an old poem he wrote about the tree after hearing the story himself 25 years ago.
It sounded such an appealing story.
Now he wants the tree preserved, especially since coincidentally there are 6 other trees planted across the street for veterans who died after the First World War.
That's something that could, I guess, be an image for all of the people who fought so hard.
It's always nice to know that these boys are remembered.
Now, Councillor Francis Nunziata is looking into a heritage designation for that very reason. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm Farah Morali at Bathurst and Davenport, where freezing rain continues to fall. This storm prompted the closure of every school in Toronto. Coming up, I'll have more on that decision by the TDSB.
don't remember they not having to go to school on a snow day. Of course, I have to go into the mode of, what do I do with them now? But let's just say I'm grateful the library is open. God said it. Don't sweat it.
And I know that, organizing the kids to go to school when mom and dad work is a real pain in the neck. But, I can understand why the school board would say, right, today's a day that we have to stay at home. The roads are slippery. It's a blizzard. And I think it's best for all that they do have snow days on days just like this.
Dad looking like he's having a tough time getting up the hill there. It's just the third time in 20 years that the Toronto District School Board has declared a snow day. Farmer Morelli joins us live now from Bathurst and Davenport and Farrar. This is a rare move for the TDSB. What's the board saying about why it decided to do this today?
It is a rare move, Dwight, and what it told us today was ultimately it came down to this combination of different weather systems, as you can see now. The freezing rain mixed with the wind, mixed with the snow and the ice pellets. Ultimately, it says that's what it came down to. It looked at the forecast and decided to go ahead with the closures. Now, it doesn't have a set criteria for how it decides when to close the schools or not, like for instance number of centimeters or accumulation, but it just decided with that combination it will go ahead with the closures. And it's a move that caught a lot of people by surprise because of how rare this happens. As you mentioned, the last time we saw schools across the city closed was way back in 2011. That was during the winter that many people dubbed Snowmageddon. This was way back in February 2011 when the city got pummeled with snow. Prior to that, the last time that we saw the TDSB close its schools was in 2009. That was January 2009. And that was when then Mayor Mel Lastman actually brought in the army to try and clear some of the snow and help people. And it's a winter that many Torontonians will definitely remember. That was the last time prior to 2011 that we saw schools close. Today we had a chance to catch up with the TDSB to explain why they decided to move ahead again with that closure today.
We always do what's best for Toronto. There are other boards that have closed, there are other boards that have not closed. But we look at Toronto and to be honest, make our best informed decision as we possibly can. We're not meteorologists, but what we are is a group of families that does not want to put anyone in harm's way either.
The big question is, of course, for parents, is what's going to happen tomorrow. When we did speak to the TDSB, it told us that they hadn't yet made a decision about tomorrow. It says it will be updating parents at 6 a.m. It all depends on what happens with the storm tonight, Dwight.
All right, thank you for that, Farah. Go get warm and dry now. Let's head to Colette Kennedy. Colette, I think what was different about this storm, one thing, we didn't get the bitter cold that we had with the last one.
That's right.
And also, a lot of folks heeded your warnings and stayed home today, it looked like. It was like a ghost town out there downtown.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, but it is a good thing that that's happened. That's right. At times, looking out on the street of downtown Toronto, can't believe you only see one or two people, somebody just rushing across the street, and that's about it. You don't see that often. It was a good idea, so don't be second-guessing yourself. If you're one of those folks who are like, oh, I stayed home, maybe I should. No, you did the right thing. We've had just about everything, every type of precipitation, and we're not done with it yet. Look at the temperatures that we have throughout the region. So -5 in Markham, -6 for those of you watching us from Oshawa. It's 0 in St. Catharines, and then we have the -1 Mississauga, Toronto, and Hamilton, and 0 over at Kitchener. And so we're seeing various types of precipitation. We've got that warmer air overriding colder air at the surface, some of it kind of mixing down. So there are areas where you're at one moment into ice pellets, then into snow, and then back towards freezing rain. Along the lakeshore here for the city, we've come back to some ice pellets close to the lake. It's more rainfall activity that we're seeing further south. As you get towards Hamilton, you're kind of that dividing line. But the pink is the freezing rain, purple ice pellets, and then we get into the snow. And I know that you know the green is the rainfall. So that's been working its way in. Look how vast this is, though. There's all this snow back here towards the west. That's coming our way. I say all this snow. It won't be significant amounts, but we still have to see the rest of this system through over the next few hours. And by the way, you may have friends or family that are vacationing down in Mexico. This system is connected all the way down down. The tail end goes all the way down there. That's how big this Colorado low is that's been moving through. Back into our closer look, and we'll kind of take this through the timeline of tonight. So 8 p.m., we're still looking at that mix through the area. Some areas to the north getting more snowfall, and that's why the amounts will be heavier, like into the Ottawa Valley, where they're looking at significant 30, 40 centimeters in some areas to the north. But us getting towards midnight, it's breaking up. It's becoming lighter snow to some scattered flurry activity, and into Wednesday, that's mostly what we'll see. Now, with the strong winds, and we will have strong winds, we're going to see some of those gusts coming off the lake, and that'll mean some lake effect stuff. But for the city, it's mostly going to be flurries. Don't be frightened by what you see here. That 5 to 8 centimeters would be north, to the north of the city, closer to the shoreline. We might get a couple of centimeters more. And in terms of the winds, that's really going to be something that we have to watch carefully, because we're going to see some very strong wind gusts continuing. Some of those gusts over 60, even in some cases over 80 kilometers an hour. Overnight tonight, -4 to -5 for your lows, other than St. Catharines. Again, tapering off after midnight. And then tomorrow, we still have to deal with blowing snow, so visibility will still be reduced at times because those winds kind of stay with us, but not quite as bad. Thursday, milder, and same with Friday, with a mix possible light stuff. But then we dive, the temperatures are going to dive as we go towards the beginning of next week. So that colder air you were mentioning off the top, it's coming back to us, Dwight.
We say uncle, we give up already. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, I feel like I've got your arm twisted behind your back.
Now, the warmer West Coast is usually the envy of the country at this time of year, but not today. An unusual sight for southwest British Columbia, slammed with 15 to 25 centimeters of snow all at once today. Schools were closed and people told to stay off the roads if they could. We are learning new details tonight about an RCMP bust of a money laundering operation that saw arrests in both Toronto and Montreal.
The investigation was targeting an international money laundering network that was composed of two major organizations, one based out of Montreal and one based out of Toronto.
Project Collector was a 2-year operation. Raids in Toronto and the Montreal area yesterday led to 17 arrests and the dismantling of 2 organized crime cells. Police seized more than $30 million in assets. Investigators say the network was laundering hundreds of millions of dollars from the sale of illegal drugs. For years now, people working on the front lines of the fentanyl crisis have been warned about the risks of exposure to the deadly drug, but new research suggests handling the substance may not be as dangerous as previously thought. And now the RCMP is reviewing their policies and what officers should do to protect themselves. Catherine Tunney has the details now from Ottawa.
Fentanyl remains a deadly and unpredictable killer if ingested. But a new wave of research from the RCMP is calling into question the risk it poses to officers who have to deal with the substance on a daily basis. A new report from the force is suggesting that those early day concerns that first responders had, that they were at risk for overexposure just by touching or breathing in a substance, might have been overblown. And this marks a pretty big shift in thinking from the force, and is indicative of really how quickly the opioid crisis has developed across Canada and how much we're learning in such a short period of time. Now, Sergeant Luc Chacon is the RCMP's National Drug Program Coordinator. Here's what he had to say about the report's findings.
By sheer looking at our numbers of what we have seen is that exposure to people handling the substance is not as high as we thought it was initially.
The force is now reviewing all available evidence to try and clarify its policy on how officers should handle fentanyl. And those findings will likely be shared with other police forces across the country. Now, the head of the RCMP's Health and Safety Wing did stress that it's still important for officers to use precaution in the field, to wear gloves, and to wear a mask when possible if they come in contact with the drug, but also did say that an officer seizing or handling fentanyl is at a low risk of overexposure. Now, Sergeant Chacon said these new findings could impact the way they do investigations going forward, and could also impact the way that undercover police officers do their investigations. Officers will still be carrying naloxone, though. That will not stop. There is still value, obviously, in officers carrying that antidote when they see people overdosing across Canada. And according to Health Canada, the latest figures actually show that since January of 2016, more than 9,000 Canadians have died from an apparent overdose. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
The world's most notorious drug lord is heading to prison. El Chapo has been found guilty of drug trafficking by a U.S. jury. We'll have more on how long he could spend in jail after the break. U.S. lawmakers have reached a tentative deal that, if passed, would prevent another partial government shutdown this weekend. Both Republicans and Democrats say it took a lot of compromise from both sides. As for President Donald Trump, he says he's not thrilled with the agreement.
It's not doing the trick, but I'm adding things to it. And when you add whatever I have to add, it's all going to happen where we're going to build a beautiful, big, strong wall.
The deal sets aside less money for the Mexican border wall than Republicans would like and more money than Democrats would like. The wall is one of many spending measures that lawmakers had to compromise on to reach an agreement. Trump added he does not think there will be another shutdown, but if there is one, he says the Democrats would be to blame. Mexican drug kingpin El Chapo is now facing life behind bars. He was convicted on multiple charges in a Brooklyn court earlier today after a 3-month trial. Ellen Morrow has more.
Infamous drug lord El Chapo reportedly looked stunned as the verdict was read out in court this afternoon. He was found guilty on all 10 charges and will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. This is how an official from the Drug Enforcement Agency described the outcome.
Today's verdict is a victory for law enforcement. But more importantly than that, today's verdict is justice. It's justice for the many thousands upon thousands of victims of overdose. It's justice for their families. It's justice for their friends, for their communities, for their towns, and for their cities.
The trial of El Chapo, whose real name is Joaquin Guzman, has been a months-long spectacle. Testimony from 56 witnesses gave an inside look at how his powerful drug cartel worked, the deadly tactics it used, and the elaborate ways it smuggled drugs into the United States, including through the use of submarines. Witnesses also accused Guzman of multiple murders and of raping young women. Through his vast cartel, Guzman became one of the richest men in the world, evading authorities for decades, escaping prison on several occasions, including once when he escaped through a tunnel that he and an associate rode through on a motorcycle. Guzman is the highest profile cartel boss to ever stand trial in the United States, a victory for law enforcement officials who've been hunting down drug lords in an effort to end the drug war in Mexico, which has killed more than 100,000 people over the last 10 years. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Anti-government protesters took to the streets of Venezuela again today, demanding the ouster of President Nicolas Maduro. The biggest demonstration was in the capital, where thousands of people marched to a central square. Protesters want Maduro out and for humanitarian aid to be allowed in. Food and medical supplies are in desperately short supply across Venezuela, and the nation's economy is in near ruins. This is the man they want to help fix it. Opposition leader and self-declared interim President Juan Guaido, who had a hero's welcome at the rally. Most Western countries, including Canada, recognize him as Venezuela's leader, but Maduro still has the backing of Russia, China, and Venezuela's military. In the middle of that rally was a CBC News crew, including our Adrian Arsenault.
Okay, so what's happening here is just around the corner. That's the voice of Juan Guaido, who's on the stage talking to the people here. There were 5 opposition marches, 5 departure points. They all congregated right at this square here. People have been sort of standing in the burning sun, listening to him. One of the first things he said when he got up to the stage was to thank the countries that have supported him. He mentioned Canada and Australia first. Interestingly, he did not mention the United States at all. He talked, unless I'm mistaken, he talked about the humanitarian aid that he's been trying to get in. He says he managed to get vitamins into the country. No one's quite clear how that happened. He says he's opening up a new cargo point for humanitarian aid somewhere in Brazil. Somewhere there is an island in the Caribbean that's waiting. But still, the fact is, this big, group of humanitarian aid has not yet come into this country. So what makes all this so very interesting is that, yes, there's enthusiasm, there's energy, there's solidarity, there may even be momentum, but it's not at all clear whether any of this will be enough to oust a leader who just does not want to go. And that's certainly something that Juan Guaido knows very well. Adrian Arsenault, CBC News, Caracas.
First came the hosting controversy. Now the Oscars are taking heat again, this time over banishing some of their award categories to commercial breaks. Eli Glasner joins us with his hot take after the break. The Academy keeps tinkering with this year's Oscar broadcast. Now, last September, they unveiled a plan to streamline the televised ceremony by giving out 4 craft awards during commercial breaks. Now, they have revealed what those categories will be, and some Academy members are not too happy about it. Eli Glasner joins us now to explain why and what happened here.
5 years of declining ratings. I mean, every year it seems less people. Millions still tune in, but not enough millions. And so now they are cutting 4 of those awards out of the broadcast. They're going to award them during the commercial and then show the winner in the show. So let me read to you which categories that's going to happen to. Cinematography, film editing, makeup and hairstyling, and live action shorts. So there you see beautiful, gorgeous Roma. There you see the amazing, epic, The Favorite. I mean, the shots, you can't have a movie without cinematography, but that won't be a big part of the awards ceremony. Also short film, and there are some Canadian nominees that will be affected. Now, you know, this is just the latest in a long line of changes as they try to bring back those ratings. So the show is now hostless. We're going to be, well, they were trying to cut back the number of songs, but then you had that backlash, so they put the songs back in, and the Academy president is John Bailey. Now, ironically, he himself is a cinematographer, but he said in a statement that basically viewing patterns are changing. We need to evolve to try and successfully continue promoting motion pictures. So even like this short film that you're watching won't necessarily be part of the actual broadcast show. They're hoping this little, you know, bits and pieces will bring more viewers back. And also they have a great list of presenters this year. Not a host, but people like Jennifer Lopez, Constance Wu, Daniel Craig, Tessa Thompson. So they really are being what some would say radical with this show to try and get more eyeballs.
What we want to know, though, is the reaction to this news, because I'm telling you, people in the Academy, not everybody's happy about this.
Disgust, horror, dismay, disappointment. Let me read you a quote from Alfonso Cuarón, the director of Roma. He says, in the history of cinema, masterpieces have existed without sound, without color, without a story, without actors, and without music. No one single film has ever existed without cinematography and without editing. So you are taking the essential DNA of movies out of the awards. But as I said, those ratings keep falling. Now, some think the problem is the show is just too long, but you know, you can look at a show like what we had in 2002. That was over 4 hours, but it got 40 million viewers. So I don't think necessarily length is the problem, but all shows, even the Canadian Screen Awards, who are also going hostless, are doing the same thing, where live events just aren't getting the same traction that they used to. Now, it's interesting, I talked to an Oscar producer, the guy who produced the 2010 Oscars. He said the problem is basically you have the awards, and it's about giving your colleagues awards for good work, and then you have a show. Well, how you hand out awards and making an entertaining show, those two things don't always go together. So that is the problem. Now, it's interesting. You remember, they took away some of the songs, and then they put the songs back in. We'll wait and see what happens with this new dramatic change, but I have a feeling it's here to stay.
And you and I will be talking about this after the Oscars, and we'll see how it went. Thanks, Eli.
You're welcome.
Well, there goes the neighborhood. Some curious bears have taken over a Russian town. Coming up next, why human behavior is more to blame for this than climate change. Dozens of polar bears have invaded a community in Russia's far north, and though climate change is likely partially to blame, as the CBC's Chris Brown explains, human behavior may be making matters worse.
It's a polar bear emergency in Russia's high Arctic. As many as 52 bears have moved in, and this open garbage dump seems to be the big attraction, with lots of food to eat and all kinds of other things to explore around town. Anton, get out, screams a woman as a man makes his escape. Curious, hungry bears are wandering into and then out of apartment buildings, past security cameras, and all around neighborhoods. There's a person walking and a bear walking, says the woman's voice. And he doesn't even see him.
So something was put on the open air, edible and attractive for polar bears. Maybe the main reason why we have so big concentration of the animals in that place.
Mikhail Stietzhoff, a Moscow-based Arctic conservationist, says people should have known better than to have an open garbage dump, and it's not the first time it's happened. The town Belushia Guba is a closed military community where access is restricted. After polar bears rifled through dumpsters in 2016, the World Wildlife Fund says it tried to conduct a bear awareness campaign. But Russia's military wasn't interested, and it's likely the bears will keep coming back. It's a warming climate that's forcing the bears ashore in the first place. No ice means no seals to hunt, and scientists say the melt in Russia's eastern Arctic is likely even more severe than in Canada. Usually, relocating problem bears hundreds of kilometers away to where there's ice is the preferred solution, but in this case, that may not work.
But it's 50 polar bears. It's not so difficult to organize this transport for one or two polar bears, but how to deal with 50, I'm not sure.
So, until biologists come up with other solutions, this town of 2,500 is on lockdown, with people afraid to go outside and waiting for the so-called polar bear occupation to end. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
Hey, if you feed them, they're going to come, right?
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking for everyone there, including those polar bears. Wow.
Yeah. Climate change and human behavior. We'll get to that later. Let's get what we're dealing with here.
Well, but a winter storm warning. Yes, we still have the warning, and we've got a few more hours to go with this, Dwight, as this is moving through, but we're getting near the end of it. So for tonight, what we're going to find is that we're still going to have some mixed precipitation, different types towards the lakeshore. It's going to turn over towards rain. But eventually, we do have some freezing rain out there and ice pelts, but the snow is eventually going to come back in, light stuff, and then becoming scattered flurries, especially as we get after midnight. That's when the temperature will start to fall off. -4, windy conditions though. So tomorrow morning it's going to feel more like about -12. So we're back to some wind chills because those winds are strong, and just some scattered flurries into tomorrow afternoon. So -3 for the high, but again feeling a little bit cooler than that. So it's really the next couple of hours where we still have the mix on the roads and messy stuff out there, and then it's going to make its way on.
And some heavy shoveling for us tonight. That's it for our show. Mike Wise has you covered tonight at 11. Stay safe and dry out there. We'll see you back here tomorrow.